Hello and welcome to the Sweet Tea Shakespeare podcast. I have two newcomers today. Kathryn, how are you doing?
I'm good, Judson. How are
Hey,
you?
I'm wonderful. I'm absolutely wonderful. I'm ready to talk today. And I got Aaron over here with me too.
Good morning.
It is a wonderful morning indeed. I got this beautiful mug. I don't know if you can see it. Perfect. Okay,
There
I'm the
we go.
bride today. The bride of the Sweet Tea Shakespeare podcast. As you know, I'm one of your hosts, Judson Clark, and I'm here with two wonderful first time guests. And today we're going to be talking about some lovely things that I can't wait to talk to you about. But first, let me give you a little bit of the rigmarole about what we do here. Here we talk about everything Shakespeare, all your favorite teas, and everything else sweet in the world. The Sweet Tea Shakespeare is a nonprofit theater company and training ground inspired by Shakespeare and the early modern period in its spirit and operations, based in Fayetteville and Raleigh, North Carolina. Here on the podcast, we bring in a guest or two and get a closer look on what makes sweet tea possible. You can catch this episode as a video podcast on YouTube, or if you just want the audio, let's say you're like driving or whatever, we're not going to shame you. You can still listen to it. You can find us on Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other podcast platforms around the globe. Today's episode is made possible by a number of delightful people, such as the folks at the Capitol Encore Academy, Napkins, the restaurant, the Arts Council of Fayetteville and North Carolina, and Homelight. We'll talk more about them later, but right now, I'm here to talk today about some green tea and about some Raleigh. Let's get into it. So first and foremost, we've had two wonderful productions regarding our green tea, and in case you don't know, that's our youth program. And I brought Kathryn here today, who's kind of been the face of green tea. Is that right, Kathryn?
That is correct. I have been directing the past two shows.
Excellent. And so I wanted to bring you on here today to talk about these two shows. The first one we did a few months back, As You Like It. And you said this was your first thing directing?
My first time directing, yes, for green tea and overall. Most of what I did before was on stage stuff. Not with sweet
Nice.
tea, but
Yeah,
many
yeah.
years ago.
So tell me about this experience of directing, because I can imagine, like, first of all, directing is like a whole other ballgame. That's a whole other fight. So, and then
It is.
directing kids, man, tell me all about that.
Well, I'm lucky to have a wonderful group of children. They range from age 11 to 17. So we have quite a wide array to work with. And our goal is always to meet the kiddos where they're at, to give them roles that are going to stretch them and teach them about empathy and working together, because theater is a team activity, right? You're not up on stage alone. So it's actually been quite a rewarding experience. Like, we'll have kids who come in and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Kathryn," and they're like, "Hi." And then by the end, they're like belting out their lines on stage with no fear. So it's pretty cool to see them grow and change and gain some self-confidence through the program, which is probably the most rewarding part of what I get to do with green tea.
Nice, nice. And so I bet this was like a eye-opening experience to really see kids come out of their shell
Yeah,
with that. I know
yeah.
I can imagine how rewarding that might be. Nice, lovely. And I came and recorded that. I had such a great time just watching them really, really do their thing. You know what I mean? And we, as we're recording this, you are in the midst of the other thing, the
Yes.
Green Tea Spectacular Shakespearean Showcase.
Yes, that is correct. It is the first time green tea in its history has done something like this. I had four high schoolers who have been involved with green tea for at least a couple of shows step up and pick four scenes to direct. So we have one kiddo doing a scene from Romeo and Juliet. Another kiddo is doing a scene from Midsummer Night's Dream. We have two gents, and then Taming of the Shrew. And the kids pick the scenes, and then we work together kind of to divvy up the cast, and they cast their shows, and they've been directing the whole thing with supervision from me, but it's all been their vision and their hard work. And last night was our opening night, and to see how proud these directors were of their casts,
Mhm.
it was a cool experience. It was, and they deserved it. And there's also some monologues, and then our directors close out our show with improv, which is a scary, scary thing, but they did really, really well last night. It was their idea. They're like, "Hey, can we do this to close out the show?" And they absolutely killed it last night. So yeah, super, If you can't tell, I'm very proud of my kids.
Yeah, yeah, that's so I bet when you guys were starting up the showcase, you were saying, "Well, I just had that level of stress with directing. Good luck. Just let me pass the baton over to you guys." No, but that's
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that's such a unique and awesome experience to
Yeah.
get hands on, because I doing shows as a kid would think that that's just so impossible to reach. I'd be curious, oh, I wonder what it's like behind the curtain directing and doing all that stuff, but never really getting the chance. That's the grown-up role, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I can only imagine how they must feel being able to do this.
And just giving them that leadership and to work with their peers. And it also gives the kids a chance to see different directing styles,
Mm.
because I direct one way and obviously the kids direct a completely different way. And we always try and keep our green teas completely involved in the whole production piece. We have kids. Usually there's a student assistant director with As You Like It. I had a student assistant director who
Yeah.
took over a couple of scenes and blocked them for me. Um, and we have kids running lights, kids helping with costume. I have kids running my entire backstage. So they're really involved in the entire process,
Mhm.
which is a pretty cool opportunity for them to learn all the different pieces of what it takes. It's not just memorizing lines and getting up on stage. There's a lot that goes
Yeah.
into a play.
Yeah. Now, speaking on your personal experience, have you done any theater of any sort, whether it's on stage, off stage, behind the scenes, all that, as a kid yourself?
Yeah, so all through high school. I was part
Really?
of my school's theater program. So I
Hmm.
did like 6 or 7 shows all throughout my high school career. And some of them, which is kind of where the idea for student directing came from. We at my high school, I grew up in Washington State, so way far away. But we did during musical season, our class did one act plays instead of a big show, and they were all student directed and overseen by our director. Um, so it's a little different because we're doing Shakespeare instead of one acts, but it's like, well, kids can do this if they're given the right tools. So let's see what we can do. And they didn't disappoint. It was amazing,
And
absolutely amazing.
honestly, honestly, I don't know if Aaron can attest to this. But that is the way to go versus trying to put on the big extravagant. Like we did Hairspray, we would do Shrek, and they'd all look all busted. They look like you just picked off the pieces from a thrift store. And look, I know public schools got to do what public schools got to
Yeah.
do. But
Well,
let me
see,
tell you, I'm
luckily,
mentally scarred.
luckily we had an amazing theater budget. So they put on a big, like massive musical, and then we just did small shows. Because
Dang.
those of us who cannot sing, which is me, we're not part of the musicals.
Yeah, I completely relate to that. Let me tell you. I just think you're just trying to make me upset and make me super jealous because you were able to pull up both of them and you just flex it on me. Now, Aaron, what about you? What's your experience? Did you have any? Were you a child star?
Actually, yeah, kinda. My mother is a longtime voice teacher, and she kind of got her name back in, I guess, the early '90s, and she was approached by a theater company, Young People's Performance Company in
Oh,
Durham. They were based out of the Durham Arts Council in the basement. This great old theater that the founder and her husband like hand built a rotating stage into at this point almost 40 years ago. And so she was the music director for their summer camps. And the second year she worked for them, my dad was working during the days, so I went with her to rehearsals. And at, I think, 4 or 5 years old, I'm sitting there in the big kids show rehearsals, watching them put on Fiddler on the Roof. And as anyone will attest, if you're putting on shows like that, you're like, well, hey, this kid's around and we need kids. So are they responsible enough to go on stage? Then they're going on stage. So I got to be the bartender's son in Fiddler on the Roof, and I think that's the last summer, or that's the summer before was the last summer for until I was 19 or 20 that I didn't do the summer musical there. Um, so I did it every year, and once I hit about 10 or 11, I started doing the during the year shows, which were, there'd be one or two in the fall, one or two in the spring, all broken up by different age brackets. And so yeah, I started at 5 and kind of never stopped. So
Man, what an early start. And
yeah,
so professional too. Like you just went like straight in.
really did. And my dad is a painter, so he would get asked to come in and paint sets. So I would come in and help him paint sets, and then I would know the tech people, and then I would learn how to do the lights and learn how to do this. And much like you guys are saying, they had the once you got into the oldest group, the I think sophomore in high school and up were called the masters. It was no longer a paid gig. Now you audition to become part of the company.
Hmm.
So for those last 3 years of high school, it was kind of a different vibe, and you were trying to put on more professional shows. But they did stuff like once a year they would have scenes that the students would direct and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean that's where I learned most of what I know. A lot of stuff went to school later to study my theater and was learning, acting techniques and this is part of the Stanislavski, this is part of the Chekhov, this is part of the Meisner. I would learn all these things, be like, oh, there's a name for that thing we learned how to do, because it had just kind of been woven into the education and into the putting in each show. As you're just putting on the show, the little snippets that your director tells you that eventually start embedding in your brain. You realize name for that. That's an actual thing. So without
So
actually having to sit down with a textbook and be like, let us today learn of theory of the technique of Stanislavski.
you guys are just trying to tell me that neither of you guys had that awkward stage where you're doing really poorly put on for community theater productions. And look, we're all adults. We can admit when high school did bad
Oh,
shows.
hold on. I don't think anyone said that. I don't think either of us said we haven't been in bad community theater shows. These were kids shows.
Oh man. Okay, good. Good. That made me feel better because I cannot be alone in experiencing what I experienced.
I think the advantage of having grown up occasionally doing shows where the first time you ran the whole thing was opening night means I have a much higher threshold for like freaking out. Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to get a run in, but like we know our lines, we'll put on a show. It's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It takes a
Absolutely.
lot more for me to freak out about the state of a production.
Well, and I think with children, something amazing happens when those lights come on and there's an audience in the seats. Because our last dress rehearsal was Thursday, and there was a little bit of freak out going on among my directors because it did not go well. But then last night they pulled off an almost perfect performance because the lights were on and there was an audience and it counted. And that happened with As You Like It. It happened in previous shows, and in shows when I was doing high school theater, everything known to man would fall apart, and then lights go up on opening night, and it happens. The magic just happens.
Yeah, that's 100% right. Like non-theater people will never understand like I think it's super pretentious when I say it, but there is something that is just straight up magic that,
Yep.
the technicalities of it can all fall apart and something like that. But there's just something about when it's the real deal that 9 times out of 10, and I'm not saying opening nights are always going to be perfect. We
No.
always will the actors will always look at it in retrospect and be like, that was the worst thing. And they're not able to give it their all until they're comfortable in the run of it. But whenever things feel so grim and we just feel like we cannot put on a show tomorrow, it's not going to work out. There's something about like I said, 9 times out of 10 that it just like, it feels right. Right.
Yeah.
I remember my first show ever. I mean, of course I did like talent shows in elementary school, but my first show, community theater, it was a pretty good production. I had a really good time with it. I was about like 11 years old. I was one of the Von Trapp children in Sound of Music. Let's go. And There is something about I've never, I'd like to consider myself a pretty decent actor. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to be humble, but also trying to be worthy, right? And but there's something about being 11 years old on the stage. You got these big bright lights at eye level back then at eye level. I can't see any of the audience, but I know they're there because I hear them. And I do a funny thing, the little march, and then I'm Friedrich, I'm a boy, or I'm a man, or whatever he says. And I stomp back and I hear the audience laughter, and I cannot help but go, there's just something about that you just cannot help.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was before As You Like It opened, I called my mom freaking out because I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be. And she did community theater. She did directing of children in community theater as well. And she's like, don't worry about it. It'd be all right. Like it's that magic. And once they hear the audience, especially in As You Like It, which is a comedy, I went back at intermission to see the kiddos, and they were all they're like, they think we're funny because the audience was just rolling on Friday night. And I was like, yeah, because you are. Like,
Yeah.
you did it. Look what you're doing. So yeah, it's just cool. I'm glad my kids got that opportunity.
There's just
I mean,
so
it takes
much.
years. It takes years of work to find confidence in your comedy without an audience. Like that's such a difficult thing. So I don't I don't remember back that far, the first time, we did an actual comedy. But I mean, even still as a grown adult performer who's been performing since I was a kid, very confident in my work, very, sure of myself. There are still times in a comedy where you go and you get that first audience and you deliver that one line that you think is the funniest thing you've ever said, and no one laughs.
Oh.
But then later, some other passing thing just wrecks the audience. You never know. But that moment of, oh, thank God, this is funny. Oh, I was so worried. I was, yeah.
Yeah, I remember whenever a joke of mine wouldn't land, I'd be like, the audience is dead. And then they're like, no, they're laughing at my jokes. It's just a you thing. And then
That wasn't as funny as you thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. That's the tragedy. But yeah, like even when things are not inherently a comedy, there's just something about when you're that passionate about something. What your first time experiencing an opening night and just the run of it, because Tech Week is absolute hell. Like you were just stressed 100%. And it brings out the worst in humanity. It feels apocalyptic at times. And then there's just so much joy. And that's why my little 11-year-old self, audio listeners, if you didn't see the face, you're missing out. Pop on over YouTube and look at my little face. But my little 11-year-old face just having that cheesy, goofy little grin was not because, well, I mean, it was because I couldn't act correctly or anything like that. But it was also just because of the joy of having that reaction, and that's for those people who are into doing film and stuff, there's just something about that you're missing out on. You don't get that reaction. You'll get typed reviews and you'll have people compliment you on the film, but there's something about live theater that like is extra stressful, but also extra rewarding. So, and then also you can't edit out live theater too. So that's our whole tangent about live theater. But yeah, so I'm excited to start working on more film stuff, but there's just something special, something absolutely special for live theater. Do you guys have like some horror stories of like the absolute worst live theater blunders? Because while you're thinking about that, I'll tell you one. We were in the middle of Hairspray, and there is a scene, and this was the community theater, not the high school, but there's a scene where Tracy's in the cell, Link's trying to break her out, and I was still a kid at this time. I wasn't of any date of any age that I could play these lead roles, but I was able to watch from the green room on the live video feed. And he's trying to break her out, and one of the ceiling tiles falls like right next to him, and it's one of those heavier duty ones. It could have like taken him out. He was also a frail little boy, and it fell right next to him. And everyone panicked. You heard gasps in the audience, and he tried to chisel it. He tried to use the ceiling tile to chisel the bars or file the bars down. And that's one of the most traumatic for mine. What do you guys think?
The worst one that I have, just truly horrifying. We were doing Eugene O'Neill's one act Recklessness, which is a melodrama, like the actual legitimate theatrical style of melodrama. It was written kind of post that era, but very much intended to be acted that way and performed that way. Um, and there's this really intense moment. I'm playing this awful, awful white bread, very rich, pompous guy who finds out his wife is cheating on him, his young, beautiful wife, and then manipulates the whole situation to be like, oh, yes, I'm going to give you a divorce because I found out about this. I'm so magnanimous. While at the same time, like, kind of tricks her lover into getting himself killed. And so big dramatic moment, like the body is brought in and just put on the couch. She screams and runs upstairs, and he's all smug and pulls out a cigar and gets ready to light it, and then the gunshot goes off, and my character is supposed to freak out for a moment, run, stop, collect himself, call in the maid very calmly and dramatically, and say, call the doctor, Shelby. Mrs. Baldwin has just shot herself. Dramatic and intense.
Mm-hmm.
I do that little start to run thing, but I am wearing period dress shoes. And I start doing that thing from the cartoons where their lower half just becomes a circle and the feet are just slipping and slipping and slipping and slipping, and you're trying desperately to catch yourself. And I'm running, and I'm a heavy guy, I'm top heavy, and I start leaning forward, and I manage to. This is a full built college set, like good theater departments, like built up high walls kind of thing, and like looks like the interior of this whole house. I managed to get a hand on the banister, and I'm swinging as my feet are still slipping and sliding on the ground, and I swing full momentum, my entire 200 and something pound body slammed against this set that just rattles and shakes. Stop. The cigar that was in my hand has been crushed to powder. I just stop, dust off my hands, go back, get another cigar, and as coldly and as like, no, nothing just happened, as I can, deliver that final line. That was closing night. So we had strike that night, and strike is a full departmental thing. And my carpentry crew came to me. They're like, dude, that whole wall, every single screw is stripped. We have to take this whole wall apart with a crowbar, with just pry bars and like metal saws. And yeah, I think that was the worst, most just terrifying blunder that I've ever had.
Oh man. Oh man. That's straight out of a cartoon too. That whole ordeal.
Yeah, it was a whole thing.
Kathryn, what you got?
Oh man, I can think of a lot of little things, but probably the scariest one, it was when we were doing one acts in high school, and I was stage managing a show called Who's Chasing Whom, which is actually a completely silent one act. And we have seen signs that come down on flies that say different things to highlight what's going on. And I'm standing in the wings, on the headset, directing when the flies are supposed to come down. And one of my flies broke, and I have a sign, like a wooden sign, just swinging over my stage where my actors are standing right underneath it. It was probably the most terrifying thing. They saw it and moved themselves, and it was fine. We brought it down, had to call an early intermission. But yeah, and I had to help a friend cut out of a costume because she had a quick change and the zipper broke. Like, live theater is super fun. Props go missing. I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, you need to know the story because anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And you just got to keep going.
That's right. All right.
A quick short one.
Yes, please.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what was going on during this show, and I will not name names of this particular production because people, it was in lifespan of my current Raleigh career show, but there was one scene where I could. I don't know if just the way the show timed out, I had a bathroom break right before that scene, and I don't know what got me so distracted. No less than 3 times, maybe 4, in a 2-week run, 2 or 3 week run, did I go on stage for that scene with my fly full on down.
Oh man.
And realize in the show, and like you can't do the full pull up, but you make a turn, you do a quick twist while someone else is talking, you have like the little half zip. You're like, that's good enough. All right, that's all right. Keep going with the scene. No less than 3 times.
Oh man.
Yep.
Now I have a new thing to tell my kids to do before they go on stage tonight.
Yeah.
Check your zipper. Check your
Check
I
your
do
zipper.
it compulsively. I do it compulsively now. After that show.
Yeah, there's I don't wish for anyone to learn things the hard way because I myself have one too many times that I've learned things the hard way, but that'll do it 100%. A mishap at something that happens in live theater with an audience, yeah, that'll do it 100%. Yep. It'll turn anyone OCD when you experience stuff like that. But yeah, so while we're recovering mentally from what we just uprooted, I'm gonna tell you a little bit today of how we made the show possible.
The Sweet Tea Shakespeare podcast is the official podcast for all things Sweet Tea Shakespeare, which is made possible by a number of lovely people and organizations. We are supported by a grant from the Arts Council of Fayetteville, the NC Arts Council, and by contributions from the City of Fayetteville, Cumberland County, and other supporting partners. We would like to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters of all levels. This is made possible by your generous contributions, and we humbly and most gratefully thank you. Want to join our lovely list of supporters? You can find us on patreon.com/sweetteashakes. That's patreon.com/sweetteashakes. The Illusion, The Little Princess, Shakespeare in Love, and Midsummer. And what if I told you that you can get all 4 of these shows with one package to sweeten the deal? That's right. The all 4 one package includes all 4 shows for $50 and $25 for students. Get first dibs at these most ambitious shows, probably in Sweet Tea Shakespeare history. That's not officially on the record, but I'll say it confidently. Don't wait for any of these shows to sell out. Grab them now with the all for one package. Join us for this deal, 4th in a lifetime. You know, I tried to do something with like the once, but change it to the 4. No, it's not clever. It's not funny. Join us at sweetteashakespeare.com/tickets. Hey guys, he didn't tell me to make this, but I'm going to make this anyway. Mr. Sweet Tea Shakespeare himself, Jeremy Feebig, has this little thing of a book called Controlled Burn. It's described as part memoir, part DIY manual, and part call to arms to intentionally set your life on fire. Now, I'm always a fan of seeing people I know and love publish their book and get their art in the world, and I highly recommend you guys check this out. There's a paperback version, there's also a Kindle version, both available on Amazon.com. I'll share a link so you can check it out, get your pre-order, because this is dropping March 7th, and I want everybody to be able to have their own copy of their own intentional fires, because I'm excited about it. I love the smell of fire, so you know what I'm saying? I can't miss out on something like this. Here at Sweet Tea Shakespeare, we've had over the years many loving, supporting community members who have showed their generosity through donations, and we thank you most humbly, sincerely, gratefully. We love you, and we also love the ones who haven't been able to donate. We appreciate any and all of you guys. But with that being said, there's an incredibly anonymous matching donor who is matching gifts in the next 23 days up to $5,000. That is insane. So by all means, if you want to join their ranks of these recent donations who I'm going to be listing down here below, you can make it possible for us to do what we do best. And you can make a one-time or a recurring gift by any means necessary at sweetteashakespeare.com/give. Again, if you can't, if we totally understand, just your support and love is enough for us anytime. But if you're feeling kind enough to, please, by all means, sweetteashakespeare.com/give. Thank you, guys.
And we're back. Welcome back. Thank you again to everybody who made the show possible. I'm having a great time so far, and I'm really excited to be having more great times in the future and great times in the past. Thank you all who made this possible. We're not gonna get into the weeds about all that. So now let's shift our focus over to one Mr. Aaron Alderman. How are you doing today, dog?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm working too many things right now, so I took an early night last night just to catch up on a little bit of sleep. So as soon as I finish up this, I'm heading back to Raleigh to work actually back over at Peace University, TD in their spring show. So Burial at Thebes, which I think will be going up the weekend that this comes out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, if you're not stressed to the brim of with many different projects going on at the same time, are you even living life right? You know what I mean? Like there's no other way of doing it.
When you're an artist, especially in performance art, it seems like everyone knows when you don't have anything to do, and nobody wants to call you during those times. And then like the first person, like you've got something set, kind of like, oh well, I know I've got that one project in 3 months, but I've got 3 months. So hopefully somebody will call me and I'll have something to do. No, no, no. And you keep getting closer and closer and closer. And right as you're about to start that big project that you've been had on the calendar for 3 months, everybody wants to call you and say, hey, can you fit this in? Can you fit that in? Can you do this? And, yeah, sure. I haven't had anything to do for 3 months, so I'm totally rested and I can totally do all those things.
That's absolutely true. You know how many people, like when you talk to non-theater folk and you're like, you give out the theory that everything in my life happens all at one time and it's just a bunch of nothing and then a bunch of everything and then it's back and forth and they're like, what are you talking about? They don't understand.
It sneaks up on you because
Mhm.
it's the kind of gig where it's like you're doing one job and then someone says, hey, pay you a little bit more, can you also tackle that? Hey, you're the TD, we really can't find a lighting guy, can you handle the lights on that? Yeah, sure, throw me a little bit more and I'll take that on. But you do that, a couple too many times, suddenly you're staring down the barrel of, a couple of 80-hour weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so I want to ask you, because we talked before the ad break about, Kathryn's experience with her being her first green tea directing, but where did you come from? You know what I'm saying? How did you get started with Sweet Tea? What's all that story about?
Uh, well, I had moved back to Durham, um, 10 years ago. No, not quite. Maybe 8 years ago. Um, and I hadn't really performed much since I had left my theater program, um, a couple years before, and I'd just been trying to get my feet under me, working a regular job, and I'd been doing a lot of music. I had a little blues duo, and I was, hosting a couple of open mics and stuff like that. But I missed theater, and I did a couple of auditions, didn't go very well, and then I saw a posting from David Henderson and Jeremy Feebig that Honest Pint was doing an uncut Hamlet, the longest Shakespeare show, and they were doing all of the words. And I thought, well, I mean, I have to audition for that. When is anyone ever going to do something like that again? So I went to the audition. I remember it really vividly. Seemed to go well, but then I didn't hear anything back, and I didn't get a call back. I didn't hear anything back. And then I got a call from Jeremy going, "Hey, so I don't. We sent you an email a while back. We haven't heard from you. We wanted to know if you wanted to accept those roles." I'm sorry. So it had gone to spam and went back through, and they offered me Ronaldo, which is a part I didn't know because it's always cut. Um, Osric, which is an even better part in the uncut version, and to play the Gravedigger, which I'm a big fan of clowning, so I was 100% on board throughout the process. I ended up also doing the music directing for the show. Incredible experience. Um, and then about a month or two later, after the show had closed, I kind of immediately steamrolled that into being just so excited to be back in the theater. I lined up a couple of other shows out in Burlington and Raleigh, and Jeremy called me. They had lost their Enobarbus in Antony and Cleopatra, and asked if I would come in. I was like, "Oh, how far's Fayetteville?" He's like, "It's about an hour, maybe a little over an hour." Um, I lived in North Durham at the time, so that was about an hour 35 when I didn't hit traffic. And I will never forgive him because that began a long period of my life where I drove back and forth to Raleigh from Durham, back and forth to Fayetteville from Durham so many times, because unfortunately I just kind of I fell in love. Um, I went and we did Antony and Cleopatra in the um, it's not called an auditorium. When you're in a church, the big main room, sanctuary, in the sanctuary of Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. And what they did is they had these huge pieces of black fabric that they had rigged from the rafters to come down and create this kind of tennis court style theater where you had audience on both sides and a place in the middle, and we did music, and we got to open the show with me getting to sing the Decemberists Infanta as this big kind of carousing circus piece with this amazing choreographed thing with everybody coming through with all these beautiful things and ribbon dancing and all this. And I got to meet some of the people who are still my absolute favorites within Sweet Tea. Some of the people who I just value so much, all in that production, and I was doomed from there out. And so had a really wonderful time, and kind of just kept getting asked back and kept getting asked back, and whenever I could fit it in between other stuff, and then other stuff started having to fit in between when I was doing my Sweet Tea things. So um, finally, kind of caught my breath enough to go, "Guys, I love you, but I can't keep doing Fayetteville. I'm sorry. You can call me when you need a hand with something, but I can't keep doing shows out there." Well, as a matter of fact, we're starting up. We're trying to do more stuff in Raleigh, so that's closer to you, right? Yeah, yeah, it certainly is. And so now I am kind of, um, if Kathryn is the face of green tea, I am kind of the skulking shadow of Raleigh sweet tea. Um, I am not in every production, but you're gonna see me around. Something needs getting done. I'm kind of just the universal gopher. I work lights for Peace University as well, and since most of our shows have been housed at Peace, I'm the one. I come in, I'll do all the lights. Often I'm doing music or something like that. So it's just, yeah, kind of been my job to kind of fill in the gaps where we need it amongst these different productions that since we're in Raleigh. So
Man, what a hardcore origin story, I tell you what. Now, you're one of the few people who've been able to experience Fayetteville and Raleigh sweet tea. And just on my limited time, because I do shows out in Fayetteville, so I've been able to shoot trailer stuff and streaming stuff for the Raleigh stuff. And just in that little time that I'm there, I experienced such a different kind of experience from between Sweet Tea Fayetteville and Sweet Tea Raleigh. Now, how do you feel about that? No, and of course you don't have to do like favorites or anything like that. You know, I'm not about to get you in trouble or anything like that. But like,
whatever, come at me.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
I mean, there's multiple differences. A large one is our audience, because in Raleigh we are pulling from an audience of theater goers, people who often have already experience with Shakespeare, but also a lot of opinions about Shakespeare. So that's a very different vibe from maybe pulling from an audience of, yeah, I read about that I read that play in high school, or I read some Shakespeare in high school, but this I've just heard is a really cool thing to go to. So it's a very different pull there. We also in Fayetteville, we've been established long enough, um, that we've established ourselves in a number of venues, that we're able to, they as they were sort of figuring out what they wanted to do and what was important to them in terms of the theatrical elements. We're able to go to those venues, and find the places that best fit that. We've been incredibly lucky, because of our relationship with Wade Newhouse, who is a regular in a number of our shows, and Raleigh shows, most recently directed Richard III, and he is, I don't want to misspeak his official title, but he's more or less kind of the head of the theater department at Peace University. Um, he's been able to allow us to kind of work out of Peace, which has been great. I love the Leggett Theater, um, but it's not been as conducive to some of our other elements, and so sometimes we've had to just let some of the things we're used to go. Sometimes we try to kind of jam it into there, and it doesn't quite work. Um, and so we're kind of playing a little bit of a balancing act. Now, I'm very excited to say we've made new friends with the Universalist Unitarian Fellowship Church in Raleigh. Um, and they're out on Wade Avenue, and have been having some really exciting conversations with them. Um, we are going to be putting on Midsummer Night's Dream outdoors at their space, in one of their outdoor courtyards. Um, when I agreed to direct Midsummer, I was like, I don't want to do Midsummer indoors. It's midsummer. It should be outside. I want woods. I want wind. I want breeze. Um, but two, Midsummer is one of those shows that the big festival atmosphere that Fayetteville has kind of perfected. There's not a better show for that than Midsummer. And so if I really wanted to, you make adjustments for your new demographic, and you make adjustments and learn how to live in a new market. But I've been really longing to kind of put aside some of that, and say, and at least just once really hit home the true dyed in the wool sweet tea experience that thus far you've only really been able to get if you've gone out, and seen one of our shows in Fayetteville. So as we're set now, we're going to have food trucks pulled up, or a food truck pulled up within hearing distance of the stage. We're going to have a bar at the back of the audience so people can get up during the performance, go to the bar while still watching the show. We've got a beautiful little balcony that if we ever do Romeo and Juliet again, it's perfect for the Where Art Thou. But we're going to put our band up there. It's just going to be strung lights and beautiful and magical. So I'm incredibly excited about that. to create really kind of mirror that experience that so enraptured me with Sweet Tea when I first started experiencing it.
Mm. Now, this you're talking about Midsummer being outside in Raleigh. Since now, forgive me for being ignorant on this, but since Sweet Tea was able to branch out into Raleigh, have you guys done an outside show, or has it been at the Leggett Theater?
I don't believe we've done an outdoor show since we've branched out to Raleigh. Because we started out in Raleigh with a couple of joint endeavors. We did King Lear as a co-production with Honest Pint. We also our Macbeth did a tour and a weekend in Raleigh again at Leggett. And I think there is a couple other venues we've done for maybe some smaller productions. I think a couple of our lits have traveled into Raleigh, but we've not done a full blown outdoor production in Raleigh, as far as I'm aware.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, I'll probably get a message from Jeremy. We'll all get messages from Jeremy saying, actually, we did this time and here and there. But yeah, so to our knowledge, that this is a first of Sweet Tea Raleigh. And I know you guys, like you've been saying, that with it being at Leggett, you aren't able to do the thrust that we usually do, where we have audiences on three sides.
Well, it's that's not entirely true, because if you look back at Hamlet and Lear, we brought the audience on stage.
Oh, I see.
The reason that hasn't been a thing, that's been a COVID thing.
Right,
Um,
right.
You know, we are starting to get more comfortable being able to block things a little closer to our audience, to have a little bit more intimate relationships with
Yeah.
them. But the first one we did out of COVID, A Winter's Tale, ended up being a masked performance. We had the clear shields is what we ended up using, and then following that, we were in a their other space, Keenan, which is much more distant. But when you have a company whose whole theater ideal is about intimacy, is about, I'm talking to you, I'm making connection with you, I'm gonna come up and pat your arm. We do our chair paravel, and which is kind of the best seat in the house. We auction off at the beginning of our shows, and they're prime candidates for interaction, especially in comedies, but not necessarily. Um, but an audience, a cast member wants to go out, and they're just going to kind of sandwich themselves between them for a little while. That really bringing them into the show, and that's great. What the thrust is also great for, gives you places to sit if there's an empty seat there, and pulls them in. But with the precautions we've been having to take, you just kind of like one little baby step back to that at a time. And we're starting to get closer, which is very, very exciting for me, and I'm very happy about that, because that intimacy is another aspect of what I think made Sweet Tea so attractive to me, was that beyond all the other stuff, it wasn't just. It was also the way they put the play on itself, where we're all here together, we're all in this together, and so it wasn't put up on this pedestal.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited for you guys to be able to experience that outdoors with Midsummer, because that is like the definitive way to experience a show. And like you said, you're directing that's coming out this summer. And let me tell you, while I got you talking about the Midsummer, that's also part of our all for one package, or one for all. I think it's one for all. I misspoke it in the ad read, but yeah, that's part of that. We're really, really excited for that. They also come with The Illusion, Little Princess up in Raleigh, Shakespeare in Love, and Midsummer to close out the season and the package. And we're super, super excited about that. I want to thank you guys for joining me today on this whirlwind of adventure, including some ceiling tiles, a little bit of holes in the wall, a little busted up walls, and busted up zippers. And I really appreciate you guys joining me today and having a great time with me as well. And to all you guys watching out there tonight, today, tonight, yesterday, tomorrow, whenever you end up listening or watching us, I really appreciate it and glad you can join us on this journey. Thank you guys for joining me today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.